Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Berkeley County School Board meeting for the budget. Today, June the 23rd, I call this meeting to order and I declare that a quorum is present and the media has been notified. At this time, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion to approve the agenda and seconded. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Going to agenda item number 3, the public hearing 2015-2016 general budget fund budget. The presentation, Mr. Thomas, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
I'm ready for you to go, sir.
I was going to do the summer sale, but I probably shouldn't do that. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Turner. We have the public hearing of 2015-16 budget. And like every single year, I think since I've been doing this for 30-something years, revenues never meet expenditures. So there's a lot of things that we need to do on both sides of revenue creation, but also expenditure analysis. This is a similar presentation that y'all seen in the past. There are a few new slides in there, so I'll point those out. Again, I wanted to bring some connection to the road sign of infrastructure to infrastructure for public education. I think public education is a big component of economic development in any county, so I wanted to make that connection again. Again, these are some, again, the prime considerations in developing the priorities. Again, our 2014 teacher salary schedule was the lowest among Charleston, Dorchester 2 and 4 by a substantial margin, and causing serious threats to our competitiveness in attracting and maintaining high-quality teachers. And also the expected student growth with declining revenues, special revenues at opening of next elementary required that we substantially increase our teacher and support personnel numbers just to maintain program quality. We also need some additional teachers to address class size coverages that occurred during the 14-15 and selected schools. So these are some things that have been some prime considerations in developing the priorities and our discussions over workshops and prior meetings. These are the priorities that have been recommended. There were some, the next slide you'll see some priorities that did not make the cut or things that we still would like to do, but at this point we can't because of state revenues and local revenues that would cause us to go out of balance. Again, I'm not going to go through the list, but significantly the 15-16 step, which is a have to for all based on the salary schedules. We've talked about 3 options on the salary schedule, 1, 2, and 3. 1 is being the $3 million, 2, 4, and the 3, $6 million. We've opted to try to make a phased-in step of impacting the teacher salary schedule using phase 1. This will be a continuing discussion next year as well, because we'll tell you a story in a minute about what will be further out even when we do this. So FTEs again, talking about that, and then some of the other list, and also next in elementary. That will be a discussion also ongoing for the next couple of years with Philip Simmons, with all the other schools that will be opening over the next 2 or 3 years and beyond. With the news of all, we'll have some significant challenges getting ready for that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Real quick? On the 5 and 3, the $8 million at the top that you said, is it on both of the? I know I asked you about STEP, but on both of those, it's about 60. It's like 60-70% of that actually going to classroom teachers.
Correct.
Okay.
Closer to 70, 68-ish or so.
68.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are some priorities that did not make it, and again, these are things we desperately need in our system. particularly in a growing school district, related to classroom assistants, interpreters, social workers, even in maintenance. Square footage is growing, so we definitely need that as well, and some of the other items that you can see. Act 388. This is a discussion we've had since 2007 of the impact, the negative impact of Act 388 on Berkeley County schools, but also every single school district in the state. Based on 4% assessment properties now, after reassessment, we're experiencing a $4.5 million loss in what we could if the state had allowed us to tax those properties. And the state has been $150 to $175 million short every year just being able to fund the Property Tax Relief Act. So guess where that money's coming from? It's coming from public education, in part, probably most significantly from public education, and probably from the base student cost, since that's the largest state revenue to school districts. So, so this is a double-edged sword, kind of hurting not only us, but every single school district. And as 4% properties or rooftops start growing in Berkeley County, that number is going to exponentially get worse. We have talked significantly this year about a 3-year look back for catch-up millage, and again, I'm just referencing the law that allows us and other school districts to look at this idea as a way to promote our priorities through teacher salary schedules and FTEs and that sort of thing. So we wanted to bring your attention to let you look at it. And we're not the only school district that has enacted this. I believe Lexington 1, Greenville, and some others. Even if we were to enact this, our millage would still be low. It will be under the state average for this year and all kinds of other statistics. But again, even when we do this, we'll still be conservative in comparing ourselves to the state. This is the spreadsheet. The yellow columns, or the yellow numbers, are the items of the millage that we are able to catch up in this budget cycle. And then the 15-16 is the new, since it's not a catch-up, it's a new one. So we were able to actually catch up over 17.8 mills based on the value of the mill, as last I've heard. So that generates about $8.5 million.
Brantley, can you explain what those columns are again? I'm sure you've gone over it
The
before.
far left is the fiscal year.
Mhm.
The next one is the mill rate for that fiscal year. The next two columns are and I might get them backwards, but one is CPI, Consumer Price Index, that is indicated to us by the State Board of Economic Advisors. And the other formula is the percentage of population growth. And it's population growth for Berkeley County, not the Berkeley County school children population, is the whole county. And then the middle column, 584, 513, is the total of those two percentages. So you would apply that percentage to the prior year mill rate and to come up with what we left on the books. If you remember 13-14 and 14-15, 15 we did do some catch-up. We did some adding some mills on. 5 and 13-14 and 14-15, 2.1. So so those are eligible in the catch-up provision. Discussion points. Option 1, the $3 million infused into the teacher salary schedule to support teacher recruitment and retention. Even with infusing the amount, we'd still be behind Charleston by $490 at 14-15 for the bachelor's in 0 years. Dorchester 2 recently passed their budget yesterday, and they are going to have a step and a 2% cost of living. So I'm going to show you a graphic of what that looks like for 14-15, but the numbers and the colors will look probably more red than orange or yellow. So we'll even be further behind even with what we do with the $3 million. So I discussed Dorchester 2, but they actually acted on that last night. And the state has not included a cost of living increase on the salary schedule for at least the last 10 years. So, you know, if you were to estimate that at 2%, and step is $5 million a year, that's $50 million that could have been into the teacher's hour schedule if they were have to have done that. So we wouldn't be in the place we are now if they had been able to do that with state funding. Again, I alluded to Volvo earlier. We're having a study, a growth study, and one of the points that actually came out of us getting them information, statistics about our budget and our mill rate and all those kinds of things, Dr. Carey called me and actually said, if y'all are able to consider this catch-up mill rate, you'll definitely help the bottom line. I think it's been said that in 10 to 15 to 20 years, we'll basically be duplicating Berkeley County in size, almost in size, with the impact of Volvo. So we need to be ready for that, and long-range planning will definitely help that. And the forecasting that I've seen and helped them with definitely helps the bottom lines. We'll still have some challenges in fiscal years, but it definitely helps us out. And again, the priorities are funded by increase in state revenue of about $5.4 million, and then the mill catch-up and the mill formula for 15-16. So those two are get us there. We're still not getting all the priorities. Again, as you know and heard, the state has come up with the possibility of increased state revenue, and in permanent placement, it will definitely help with the general fund. And I said, hopefully we'll know by the public hearing, but unfortunately we do not. But in any event, whatever they do, should be increased revenue, and it would help us, and we could look at that in July or whenever we find out as where we could put that or how it might help the general fund. And there's a lot of discussion about a lot of money they want to send a lot of money to roads, higher ed. You know, we're in the mix somewhere in there, but we want to be prorationally in the mix, since public education is one of the highest revenue streams from the state to school districts. We want to be on the higher end of that new revenue, but we'll see what they do. This is a new slide. State funding stresses. We've talked about the roll-up of direct state aid, of which we were getting 100% of, going into the base student cost. And these are, the K-5 is what's going to happen next year. The other two actually happened last year. So the point is, we were getting 100% of that money. When they transferred it to the base student cost, we only get 75% of that money, so it's actually a 25% cut, but the programs still need to be maintained. So of those three, just for example, and these are not the only ones, it's a little over $1 million.
I'd like to interrupt just one second, make sure everyone understands what the roll-up means when people talk about, and also I've heard the phrase, simplifying state funding.
Right.
By taking categorical funding away and putting it all into one pot. It is simplifying, but if you don't get the same total amount of funding that you had gotten in categorical, and there's a systematic reduction, then that has to come from somewhere. And there is not, as I understand it and have seen, there doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement at the state level that this is an actual cut in support of public education in South Carolina. If we're losing $1 million in just these three areas.
Not just one year, but every year.
Every year. In other words, it's taken out of the stream. Someone has to address that practice. It's happened since the EIA passed. The additional penny for the Education Improvement Act. We had a number of categorical programs that were in that original thing in 1984. And then after about 10 years, it rolled up and, as we would say, rolled away. It just kind of evaporated. Once it gets thrown into it's hard to figure out what else that penny is buying now, but it's not really buying education. And so these programs, these initiatives often do this in the state, where there's a push to have something special has a special name, has a special funding mechanism, and then after a few years, it's redefined or restructured, and then the actual foundation of that funding goes away. So when things get transferred to the EFA, and then that's Education Finance Act, and then that base student cost is actually reduced when they're putting more money in it, but it's actually reduced from what it was, that's even worse. Because that frees up more monies for them to apply to other areas of the state budget, I know. But it's really seriously underfunding public education. Thank you.
I think also too, you reminded me too, one of the reasons that EIA was enacted, it had, I think, some 45 separate funding sources. And a lot of that was due to having a, if you will, a lobbyist group for each category. Gifted and talented, you know, if you took that away, you would have to answer all those gifted and talented people. If you took out whatever, it created some sort of connection to that program. So, but again, as Dr. Turner said, that's going away. Also, another thing about sales tax, if you remember in Act 388, they increased the state sales tax by $0.01, but they also took off the sales tax on unimproved foods. I don't see how the two mathematically actually work, and as of this day it doesn't. As you can tell, state funds are 150 to 175 million short in actually funding Act 388, so the two never really worked. Anyway, so I wanted to remind you of that fact.
Have these state funding stresses existed since 1994?
No.
So these
No,
are
no,
new
no.
ones.
No.
Okay, I misheard what you said.
No.
Yeah. But they started in 1984 as a revenue stream, and over the years have, you know, most recently and has gone away through EFA, and in the word of education funding reform, it really is not education funding reform in my words.
But those are stresses from this year.
Exactly.
This year and last year, yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And
And those are Berkeley County numbers now, I
Yeah,
understand.
right. As we talked about in the past, if the recession hadn't happened, if the state had gone on just like it's supposed to, with CPI growth and whatever growth they would roll into the state revenues through the budget economic advisors, the base student cost should really be around $27.90, and it is $22.20. I think the $22.20 number is a funding level from 2003 or 4, if I remember correctly. But that difference is $570 a student based on the weightings. We're actually could be receiving a little over $15.5 million if they were funding it the way they're supposed to.
Please understand, this is the foundation funding of the state of South Carolina to school districts, and it's a per pupil amount. I don't know how many of you have priced child care recently in terms of a student for a whole year, but $2,220 for even just care without education is a very small amount of money. And this $27.90 is by state law. So the state of South Carolina is underfunding what they indicated they would do in state law. And by state law, it should be $27.90. And truly, when you compare with other states, that's inadequate. Okay. So the funding mechanism, which everyone knows, I don't know how many commissions have been put together in Columbia to study this issue, is a mess. It's just a mess.
A real life story. I was actually driving my child's daycare from 15 years ago, and I remembered it was $450 a week 15 years ago. I can't imagine what it is today. So I, you know, after 5 or 6, I got a nice little raise. Two other funding sources, and these are just for example, and there are many more, but just kind of wanted to share two. The state, and I forgot what year, 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago, required every single school district to have an elementary school nurse in every elementary school. And yeah, right. The first year it was pretty close to fully funded, but as you can see, the cost is $1,275,000 now, and we only get 741,000. So, you know, but we're still required to have those nurses in those schools. Career specialists, basically the same. The formula for career specialists in the high schools, the cost is $1,267,000, and the actual allocation is $847,000, but we're required to do that. Now, we call those unfunded mandates or whatever you want, but these are just some examples of showing you what the stresses are in the school district. Not only ours, but every single school district. Total of 2 pages, $17.4 million. Wanted to again share the comparative analysis of per pupil spending. Berkeley County is ranked 67, but 24th in academic ranking. So, but you can see we're 1,200 off from the state average. School districts like ours, we're still low, and that doesn't mean necessarily the same size, but demographically, free and reduced, those kinds of things, we're still low in all categories. Even with the addition of the $14 million, we'll not make much progress, but it will at least go in the right direction.
How many districts do we now have in South Carolina? I know we consolidated one of the Florences recently.
85?
Oh,
Yeah.
I think it was down to.
Or maybe 4.
83.
83, okay. And they're getting ready to talk about Orangeburg again.
That's right. Discussions are ongoing.
Yeah, right.
I think the import of your question is that's very near the bottom.
Thank you. That was my point. Exactly.
Again, I wanted to just kind of share with you with the recommendations and the revenue stream from the state and the mills, our budget would be a little over $238 million. And the far right shows you what the different mill values are. Been a few questions about what the option 1 cost in mills and those kinds of things. So it kind of gives you like just a little bit of range of what that would do or not do.
One more time, if I could, all those underfunded areas that Mr. Thomas talked about, if they were funded, we wouldn't be asking for any millage increase whatsoever. And those underfundings have occurred very recently. So it's not I'm not surprised at all when you start looking at what other districts are saying as they have gone through their budgetary process. Greenville County, for example, has had to, they gave a raise to their folks. They had to have an increase in millage. They've raised millage now 6 years in a row in Greenville County, and their total millage rate increase over time is much greater than ours has been. And you see that in other school districts. In Lexington 1, they raised their millage 19 mills, and they're already over 250. So I think there would be about 290 mills in their district. Even if we raise our millage to the 17 mill rate, we're still not equivalent with the millage rate that we see in Dorchester 2. I want to assure you that our total millage rate, in terms of impact on the persons who are and people who are affected by this, would not be people who have the primary residence. That's not included, but it does apply to rental property businesses and, of course, automobiles and boats and things of that sort at the 6% assessment rate. But we see those stresses all in school districts all over the state that are struggling with the fact that these unfunded things coming from the state, unfunded mandates, are beginning to create a real serious crunch. And almost all school districts that have really worked on trying to maintain the kinds of salaries for their teachers they think are competitive are having to raise millage rates in order now to do that. And everyone points out that's not the way, that's not the way we want to go. That's not really the way we want to proceed, because it impacts a narrower group of folks who are involved in business and in rental properties and things of that sort. But that's the only way the state has left school districts to deal with. So we see this kind of agony all over the state of South Carolina now if you start doing research with regard to education finance, district by district, and look up what local media is beginning to say about these things.
We wanted to give you a quick example of a millage impact. We just picked a $20,000 car. Assessment ratio would be 6%. Before Act 388, that used to be 10.5. So that's actually another reduction over 5 or 6 years, 7, 8 years, actually. So again, the assessment value would be $1,200. The 17 mills would cost that car $20.40 extra a year. A rental property, $150,000 value, 6% assessment ratio. Moving on with the formula, $153. It's getting blocked by the seal, but that's $153. So I guess 50 cents a day for a year or so. Again, any increase in the mills does not impact the owner-occupied. It does impact cars, boats, planes, rental property, and those sorts of things. I'll get to the final recommendation in the regular board meeting, because this is just a public hearing, so I'll probably just bring that final slide up in the regular session. Yes, sir.
Did you want to, do you have pictures of those other two?
Yeah, I was going
graphics?
to do that. We wanted to visually show you, based on 1415, what, comparing ourselves to Charleston, we also I'll show you a screen of Dorchester 2 and 4, but let me, the green represents, and I think you all have a copy, the green represents that Berkeley County is greater than Charleston just in a simple formula, not by 1,000, not by 2,000 or whatever. The yellow represents that we're less than Charleston's by 1,000. The orange we're less than Charleston by 1,000 to 2,000, and reds are 2,000 and more. So we wanted to share that with you in a kind of a visual way, and just kind of show you across the board.
Just make sure everyone understands what the different columns are.
Yeah.
Typically, a beginning teacher would be in that bachelor's column. In
Right.
other words, if they come out and their credential is just with a bachelor's
Right there.
degree level, they would be usually beginning teachers, though some people don't proceed to get additional coursework for certification purposes. Then if they went down in more years with that, you see that they really still don't catch up. The next one is bachelor's plus 18 hours, graduate hours. The next column over is master's, people who have master's degrees. Then master's plus 30 graduate hours beyond that, and then the doctor's degree. We don't have a lot of people in that doctor's column, but we do have people who are starting out here quite a bit, and that's where our greatest deficit is in comparison to neighboring districts with regard to this. And so the third, the option that we were talking about with the $3 million is applying to cells where we have the greatest discrepancy, and that happens to be in those first couple columns. And no increase at all for the doctorate level column, because we don't really need that. So the $3 million is not distributed proportionately across the salary schedule, if you understand. It's designed to improve our situation with recruitment. Yes, go ahead, please.
And here's Dorchester's. And yeah, this is Dorchester 2 and 4, as they have the same salary schedule. And you can see, in comparison with the red, we're a little bit better off compared, but significantly in the beginning years with the bachelor's and a couple other spots. But just we wanted to share a visual of what it looked like. And again, you have copies of it for your reading enjoyment.
This is based on
this
last year. It does
yeah.
not include, any projection with regard to what they've increased their salary at 4%.
Correct.
Against our
And so I would suggest when we do get a copy of that, we'll redo the scale and it'll probably be more reds on it than not. So We wanted to kind of share a visual of it, what it looked like. And that would be the best way to show it. That concludes.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. At this time, we'll go to our public comments, and I'll read the procedures again. In order to conduct the meeting in an orderly and efficient manner, we ask that you honor the following guidelines. Stakeholder comments are welcomed and encouraged. However, the board will not take immediate action on public comments at this meeting. Any person wishing to address the board must register prior to the meeting. Comments must be regarding programs, policies, or procedures. Comments regarding complaints against employees other than district level executives or references to students other than the child of the speaker will not be heard in public session. Groups in addressing the same topic should select one speaker. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and the board chair does reserve the right to allot additional time or halt public comments that do not adhere to the guidelines. And at this time, we have Mr. Tommy Newell, who wants to say a few words.
Councilman.
Councilman also, yes.
I come as both tonight, so it's all right. It sounds like the 388 is the same thing that the county is being done wrong with the LGF. I think Ms. Kathy and I have spoke about it earlier, where we have unfunded mandates that you have. We have the same thing, and we're not being funded fully, so we have the same situation where it was called for a millage increase. But we held some people's feet to the fire, and we're trying to make sure that we don't raise taxes while still giving county employees raises, putting the deputies on time and a half. That way it'll help with the paychecks plus the morale. Also give the new sheriffs, some new toys such as laptops, dashboard cameras and stuff like that. I come to you tonight as not only a councilman, but also as a taxpayer, and both my children, well, my daughter goes to Stratford, and my baby daughter, Jossie, she goes to College Park Elementary. I'm a product of Stratford High School, and I just come to you to ask you, 17 mills is high. I have 2 trucks, 3 boats, and I'm not going to buy a plane unless it's an RC plane with radio controls. But I'm asking you if there's some way somehow that y'all can look to spread it out a little bit. I asked Water and Sanitation not to raise the water fees 5% because we just can't, and we just can't hit them at one time. And I'm not going to apologize for calling y'all Einsteins, but because y'all are smarter than me anyways. But you have those knuckleheads up in Columbia wanting to raise gas tax too. So since we're coming out of a recession, let's try to lessen the blow some. Work with us. I don't think we have a relationship with you guys too much. We're not too far down the street. I think we should have a more of a working relationship with every one of you. And we need to do what's best for our residents and for our children. It shouldn't be y'all against us, and it shouldn't be us against y'all. And I feel if you guys can show that you're going to put your own feet to the fire and try to just lessen the blow a little bit. I understand what Mr. Bentley was saying. I mean, y'all have a lot of things that you're not being able to pay for, but so do we. And we're doing everything we can, council-wise, to make sure that we don't raise the millage. It's just too much of an increase all at one time. So I ask you just somehow or another, lessen it. Try to stretch it out a few years or whatnot, because I hate for you to do it 17 this year and then come back next year and then the next year, which I don't know. Y'all got a huge budget. You have a lot of employees. You have a lot of great employees, and they do need to be compensated, because y'all have the same situation we have. We have deputies that come over, get a little bit of training than go to Charleston and Dorchester County because they can get a $5,000 raise just by going across the street. And your teachers are valuable assets. And I want them to have I want them to come to work, have fun, and when they get the paycheck, not cry over it. But again, I'm coming to you as a councilman now saying, let's work together. Let's try not to hit them, the taxpayers, so hard. There's always a way. I know there is. A bunch of smart people up there besides Mac. But, oh, did I say that too loud? My bad. But I just come to you, please, just try not to hit us all too hard. So I appreciate the time. I'm glad none of y'all have any scowls on your face. So come to council, talk to us sometimes. We would love to work with y'all. All right, thank you.
That was the only person who had given us a card. Is there any further discussion at this time?
I just want to say thank you, Councilman Newell, for coming
Yes.
tonight. I go to council meetings every now and then and see you there, but I agree with you. I think we need to work together rather than work against each other, and I appreciate you coming and talking to us tonight. I mean, we're about to, seems like it's been recommended that we increase the 17 mills, and you're the only citizen that showed up to talk, so I do appreciate you coming tonight.
Then do I have a motion that we adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn, and it's seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Then we stand adjourned.